everyone. Nice to see everyone's lovely faces. We're resuming meeting number 27 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. This meeting in particular started April 13th, 2021, and today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to the order of January 25th, 2021. And therefore all members can attend in person or virtually, and I believe at this point we are all attending virtually. So just a reminder not to take screenshots or photos of your screen, also to mute and unmute yourselves, and to make sure you've selected your interpretation channel, and to also try to refrain from speaking over top of each other. Make sure you're wearing your boom mic and that it's positioned in the right spot so that we can make it as easy as possible for the interpreters. And that's about it, I guess. If anybody comes in person to attend the meeting, then I may remind them of the rules that are in place in the room. But having said that, we are not at an unfamiliar place. We are resuming from where we left off in the last meeting, and we are on Mr. Turnbull's amendment on the issue of prorogation. And there was a speakers list that we had from last time. Ms. Pettypat-Taylor had the floor when a point of order was made. After that, we have Dr. Duncan, and we have a couple of others that are currently not here, so we'll drop them off the list. And then we have Mr. Long, who is here at this time, yes, and then Mr. Turnbull, and then the NDP member that is not here right now. So everyone who's not here will just get dropped off the list, and the list currently would look like Ms. Pettypat-Taylor, Dr. Duncan, Mr. Long, Mr. Turnbull. And then anyone else who wishes to speak or make any other comments or points of order, you can just state you have a point of order, but if you wish to speak, then you can raise your hand or in the participants toolbar section down below. All right, Mr. Luzon, you're also on the speakers list. So we'll start with giving the floor back to Ms. Pettypat-Taylor. Oh, we can't hear you at this point. Unmute, Ms. Pettypat-Taylor.
It's not starting good. My apologies for that. Before I begin, I'm just wondering if Justin would be able to confirm that my sound is okay, because we were having a few issues at the beginning. Want to make sure that the interpretation...
Yes, Madame Pettypat-Taylor, I can confirm your sound is good for the interpreters.
Great. Thank you so much, Justin. So once again, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak again regarding the amendment that was brought forward by our friend and colleague, Mr. Turnbull. Before I continue on with my comments as well, I would also like to take a moment to say welcome back to Stéphane Lauzon. We're happy to see you in good form and happy that you're recovering. I don't know, PROC seems to be difficult on some of our members lately, so hopefully this isn't going to continue. We're really happy though, Stéphane, all kidding aside, to have you back. So once again, last week, I believe it was last Thursday was the last time that we were here in PROC. I'm not going to get into all of the comments that I made last week, but just to recap just very quickly, that I had indicated at one point that when it came to the main motion, I guess, I think that I've made it very clear that I really felt that we were prepared to move forward with writing out the report, because I feel that we've heard from a substantive amount of witnesses, but again, wanted to give consideration to Mr. Turnbull's amendment. And once again, I really have to indicate that I was willing to be influenced, and by hearing the arguments that were brought forward, I truly believe now more than ever that welcoming our Deputy Prime Minister, the Honourable Chrystia Freeland, to come and appear before committee, I think in actual fact makes a whole lot of sense. And I have to take a few steps back, I guess, because not last weekend, but the weekend before, when I was reflecting on this motion and on this amendment, it just kind of struck me that Minister Freeland, in actual fact, was the chair of the COVID Cabinet Committee for a number of months. So And again, I know that different parties have different points of views, perhaps, as to why a prorogation was called. But I truly, firmly believe that because of the pandemic, that is why that we had to really readjust our agenda. And with Miss Freeland, we certainly recognize being in charge of the pandemic, being in charge of that COVID cabinet committee would make really a lot of sense in asking her to come forward and to explain to us, the reasons behind it. Comme que je l'avais mentionné aussi, si qu'on regarde à toute la question.
So as I was saying, we really needed to have an opportunity to reformulate our priorities. In 2010, there was a speech from the throne, and that had to be changed. Now, I'm not going to go back into all that I've already said about the speech from the throne, but generally speaking, when you look at the 2019 priorities and what our priorities were in 2020, it is quite simple to understand that a lot of change and a lot of adjustment had to happen in order to be able to meet the needs of all Canadians during this pandemic. And once again, Minister Freeland, if she were to come before this committee, could answer our questions. And who would be in a better position to do so? She's now the Minister of Finance as well. And she would be in a good position to explain what our priorities are and what the reasons were leading up to a prorogation. So let's look at the 2019 priorities. Well, during the election campaign, I was very interested in climate change. That was a priority for my constituents and also for my colleagues here. We also wanted to be able to help the middle class and those who are working so hard to join the middle class. So the programs related to that were a priority. There was also the issue of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples and improving health outcomes for Canadians. So those were our 2019 issues and priorities. And I'm not saying those aren't issues in 2020, but because of the pandemic, we had to make adjustments. And once again, Minister Freeland would be in a very good position to speak to us about that. And Mr. Turnbull already has laid out his arguments for this. I think it would be beneficial to hear her testimony and ask her questions. And obviously, there will be some difficult questions. We brought in a plan, we brought in priorities and programs, and it wasn't perfect, but we did the best we could in order to make sure that we were immediately attempting to tackle the issues that Canadians were facing. And so that brings me to the 2020 speech from the throne. Once again, the top priority was to protect Canadians during the second wave. And I think it's easy to forget where we were in August 2020. If we look at that now, we can see that the situation has changed significantly. And there will still be many changes that will have to be made. But in August 2020, we could see the second wave. And there were many science experts who were saying, get ready for the third wave and possibly a fourth wave. Also, the context was such that there weren't any vaccinations available yet. We were hoping that they were coming, but we weren't there yet. So much has changed. So let's think August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. So much has changed since then in that small, short period of time. So if we were to be able to hear from Minister Freeland, we could see why they chose prorogation, and I think she could give very specific answers to specific questions. Many programs were brought in to help Canadians. Once again, I'm not going to list all those programs, but I would be interested in asking Minister Freeland about them. For example, the financial assistance programs for Canadians. How did she arrive at these programs?
I was just checking, communicating with the clerk. Mr. Lukiski has dropped off.
Madam Chair, he just got back into the meeting.
Okay.
Justin, I'm not sure. However, can you hear me at all?
Yeah.
Mr. Lukiski, we can hear you, although your connection doesn't seem to be great.
Yeah, that's the problem. I've been working with IT for the last 20 minutes, and they can't seem to figure out why the audio coming through my headset is not working. I can hear the audio from the meeting perfectly clear through my headset, but you're not receiving my audio through the headset. And IT can't seem to figure out the problem.
Okay. Mr. Lukiski, I'm being told by the technician here in the room that your microphone is properly selected.
Okay?
So meaning you can hear him through his headset?
That's right, we can.
Okay. Okay. So things
All
are
right,
good, Mr. Lukiski.
We're golden.
I think your problem is resolved.
All right, thank you so much. Sorry
All
for
right.
the interruption, everyone.
No problem. If there's a more lengthier issue, I'll suspend temporarily in order to resolve it. But go ahead, Ms. Petty-Pot-Taylor, you can resume.
I think I'm jinxed because last Thursday, this was at the point where I was at, and I had a point of order. So there must be something in the air.
Maybe.
Mais
So just to continue, can everyone hear me? Says Mr. Terrien. The interpreter cannot hear Mr. Terrien.
Mr. Terrien, you're on mute. We can't hear your point of order. Uh-oh. We have just had Mr. Terrien drop off.
Madam Chair, do you want to just suspend for a minute or so, and we'll try to figure out what's going on? He may just have dropped off, and we'll try to come back, but we'll try to ascertain that.
Suspended. Madame Petty-Pot-Taylor having the floor.
merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we'll try. I'll continue with my reasons why Minister Freeland should appear. So I think that she could explain why the cabinet decided to prorogue, but also because she was for a while chairing the Cabinet COVID Committee. She could tell us about all of the support that she set up because she is now a Minister of Finance.
I think if Minister Freeland, if we are privileged and if she appears before the committee, if we all agree that that would be a good idea.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Vecchio.
I fully agree. I'm listening to Member Petitpas-Taylor, and I appreciate this, but we do know that there has already been an invitation sent out to her several months ago. I'm just wondering if the clerk could advise us whether an invitation has been responded to by the clerk, and perhaps if any of the members of the Liberals Party and the government have actually talked to them to say, hey, we're waiting for you to respond. So just seeing if maybe they've even picked up the phone and asked them to come to the committee as well. Thank you.
Okay, Justin.
Madam Chair and Ms. Vecchio, an invitation has been proffered to both Ministers Freeland and Minister Chagger, amongst others as well. We have, as of yet, received a formal response. I have periodically checked in with both their offices to see if there's any more, if they're any closer to a response, but I still do not have a formal response from either or from any of the other witnesses.
Okay, I will give the floor back to Ms. Petitpas-Taylor. Maybe she'll have something to add or.
Well, first of all, I just would like to comment, and I would like to thank my colleague, Ms. Vecchio, for that question. It's an important question. And, I think that we could also possibly, follow up on that matter to see if there's, if there's a reason for the delay. Because, again, we are making some good arguments as to why we feel that she should be here and could answer some important questions, again, with respect to the whole issue of prorogation and why the reset and what was the thought process behind all that. So thank you so much for that, Karen or Ms. Vecchio. So again, coming back to why that I think that having Minister Freeland here personally, I think for myself personally, being the Member of Parliament for Moncton, Riverview and Dieppe, a proud Atlantic Canadian and a proud New Brunswicker, I would really have a lot of specific questions to ask her with respect to the whole restart and the, again, as I've indicated, the economic programs that we've put in place in order to help all Canadians during this very difficult time. We have indicated that we've asked Canadians to stay home. We recognize that we are not out of the woods when it comes to COVID-19. We know that, yes, vaccines are not just on the horizon, they are here. However, not everyone is vaccinated. Little side note, I'm extremely pleased and thrilled that my husband got vaccinated last night. He got on an emergency list and was able to sneak in. But again, yeah, and I'm very, very grateful. And he's had no side effects, so he's a trooper. But I have to say, we need to get to herd immunity, and it's going to take some time before we get there. So I would have a lot of questions with respect to Minister Freeland. We've asked people to stay home. We continue in some areas to ask people to stay home, to continue to follow the public health guidelines. I know that many of my friends in Ontario are going through a very difficult time right now within your communities, our colleagues in Alberta, in British Columbia. So again, these programs that have been put in place for a reason, and it's to keep Canadians safe. So if Ms. Freeland came down, I would certainly, have questions with respect to, first and foremost, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. In my province alone, in my small little province of New Brunswick, of 750,000 New Brunswickers, 165,000 New Brunswickers have benefited from the CERB. But again, I'd have some questions for her with respect to all of that. And I'm sure that many of you would have questions with respect to kind of what has been done in your province and how your constituents have been impacted by it or not. And again, the whole issue of moving forward with continuing with some specific COVID response programs related to the pandemic, but also related to prorogation would be key.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just for today, I just want to try to stay on as much topic as possible. And we're talking about the prorogation. And although we can talk about these great programs with Minister Freeland, perhaps we can do that in Finance Committee. But right now, we're supposed to be studying prorogation. And so those questions we should be asking her should be regarding the prorogation. So I don't think we need to ask her about CURB or any of those programs. But if we could get back on topic of the prorogation. Thanks.
I think that may be a slight bit of debate there. I think if Ms. Pettypot Taylor can explain why it's linked to prorogation, then it would be in order. And
Sure.
I'll give her the opportunity to do so.
Yeah. Well, once again, Madam Chair, I think we all have different perhaps points of view with respect to why we prorogued. And I clearly believe that the reason for prorogation was because we were in the midst of a hopefully once in a lifetime global pandemic. And I think that the issue for prorogation was really at looking at the programs and not just programs, but what were the priorities of Canadians during this time. As I've indicated, if we look at the priorities of 2019 and the priorities of 2020, if you ask my constituents, they were really, really different. Some of them were similar, but some of them, were different. In protecting the health and safety of Canadians, making sure that Canadians stayed home, encouraging them to protect themselves and protect others, we had to be there for them. And when I say we, I mean all of my colleagues, because we all, had a role to play in putting together these programs. And I absolutely appreciate my colleague, Ms. Vecchio's point, and I absolutely do want to stay on topic. And again, we'll continue to stick to the points that I want to raise with Madame Freeland in order to ensure that we can get these questions answered, because I truly believe that this was a big part as to why that we prorogued Parliament at that time. So continuing on with respect to some other programs that I would like to ask her about, and again, were some programs that were elaborated during the issue of prorogation, was the whole issue of wage subsidies as well. And again, many people in our riding still continue to benefit from those types of programs at this point in time. So again, I can just say that in my little province of New Brunswick, we have a whole lot of people that have applied for that program. And we've been very, very fortunate that many of our establishments have been able to benefit from it. So I would have some questions with respect to that as well. The whole issue of rent subsidy as well during lockdown for lockdown support, I think would be an area that we should explore with her. And again, getting a sense as to why, you know what I mean, that they moved forward and continued with that. So the list continues with respect to the programs, and I'm not going to continue to harp at that. But I duly think, I think someone had indicated that repetition sometimes, can be helpful. And sometimes I think we need to bring make the point that that these programs, were put in place. A reset was needed because of the pandemic, and the only way that we could really get that reset was to make sure that we prorogued, that we consulted with Canadians, that we consulted with folks on the ground, and then from there we could come up with the priorities. Ça a été dit aussi dans le passé que...
It was also said that the opposition might have been thinking that our new throne speech was not sufficiently ambitious. Well, I would say that our throne speech was very ambitious. Our priority, our number one priority was to, and is, to support Canadians. I could also make another comment. If Ms. Freeland came, she could enlighten us, being the finance minister and the deputy prime minister. And I am convinced that the prime minister consulted her to determine what should be the priorities for the post-pandemic recovery. I'm going to slow down because I know that when I speak French, I tend to speak faster. So, as I said earlier, Minister Freeland was also chair of the Cabinet COVID Committee for a while. So while all this work was being done, Minister Freeland was at the center of things. I think she could certainly enlighten us on that topic. Since the pandemic started, Canada has adapted its response according to scientific data. All of the government's decisions had only one objective: to protect Canadians' health and safety. Right now, Canada is in the middle of a third wave. We've all talked about this third wave, but I think we've all been surprised by how hard it hit us. Like many other countries, we've had some problems with public health measures because of the economic and social impact. We've been saying to Canadians, stay at home, but it is true that they're worried about the financial impact, but we are here to protect them, and the only way to protect them, or the only way for them to protect themselves, is to follow public health measures. We did in some provinces there has been an increase in cases, unfortunately. Even in Atlantic Canada, we've been able to manage the crisis quite well, but there has been an increase in cases in Nova Scotia and also in New Brunswick. We see the number of cases going up. And there has been an increase in the number of admissions in ICU. This hospitalization rate is going up, and it's hitting mainly younger people. Consequently, the health system in many provinces is at full capacity. So it is more important than ever to control the increase in the number of cases. So if we go back to Ms. Freeland, she was chairing the Cabinet COVID Committee, and she could tell us about what was set up to ensure Canadians are protected not only during the second wave, but also during the third wave, but hopefully not during a fourth wave. Variants have not changed what must be done to stop the virus. Despite the increase in the number of people vaccinated, we must continue to protect ourselves and each other while we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think we have reasons to be optimistic because there are a lot of people who are vaccinated, but we still have quite a long way to go. We know that the end of the pandemic is coming, but we have to make sure that all the measures stay in place to protect Canadians.
The number of young adults that need to be hospitalized or sent to emergency care, it keeps increasing. And this reminds us that whatever our age, we can all be touched by COVID-19 and we can all develop a severe form of this disease. I'd like to stop here, Madam Chair, but once again, as we've said, we all know what we have to do to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and to get it. But once again, the government has to be there for Canadians with programs and social policies. And I think that Ms. Freeland could enlighten us about the decisions that were made and tell us why prorogation was chosen as a solution at the time. The number of cases in the country has more than doubled over a month. every new infection means more contaminations. And this is what this shows that the pandemic is not over and it's actually expanding. We need emergency measures in place in case variants spread as fast or faster, and we have to have public intervention measures. And this is why we have to limit as much as possible all contacts to reduce the risk that we are getting contaminated and that we could spread it involuntarily. On a more positive note, we can already see the effects of vaccination. There is light at the end of the tunnel. It's not all negative, but we still have a lot of work to do. On April 10th, more than 85% of the elderly of 80 years or more had at least one dose of the vaccine. Over the last few weeks, the number of complications in that age group has fallen and has increased in a slower way in other age groups. The number of outbreaks in homes and the number of deaths have also decreased. The more vaccination happens, the more effects of it we'll see. And once again, Ms. Freeland, as chair of that committee, could come and explain all the programs that were put together to help the provinces and territories with the elderly and what we can do to continue to slow down the spread of COVID. The increased number of variants is of concern because they are linked to more severe consequences. The number of cases is increasing everywhere in Canada, and over the last few weeks, we've seen that many governments are fighting those variants of concern. On April 20th, there were 70,000 cases of variants in Canada, and they represent now the majority of cases in the 4 biggest provinces of the country. And again, Atlantic Canada is not immune, since once again, as I've seen earlier, in Nova Scotia, our neighboring province, there has been a major outbreak throughout the province, and this is frightening, and they are concerned with the variants, and Ms. Freeland could come and tell us about it. We could all ask her questions, and she can give us the reasons for the decisions that were made. And of course, she can talk about the reasons for prorogation. With the appearance of variants in 2020-21, a strategy was adopted by the government to fight those variants and has invested $53 million. What will this strategy do, you may ask? It will increase the capacity to make DNA analysis and genetic analyses of cases in order to create a network of research that will be robust and based on results so that we can understand rapidly what the variants are having as consequences. This work will be done in partnership and cooperation with provinces and territories, and we have thus increased.
Sorry, I recognize that we're being very, very lenient, but we are getting into details of some programs and some options now, and perhaps this is just really outside. Our path has gone miles outside of the actual motion that's on the table right now. Thank you.
Okay, I'll remind the member to rein it in.
Absolument, Madame la Présidente, mais encore une fois.
Yes, absolutely, Madam Chair. But Madam Freeland was chair of the COVID committee, and she could give us tons of information. And I'm not getting into the details at all. I think that we could just have an overview of all the decisions that had to be made, the investments that had to be worked with. And I appreciate Madam Vecchio's comments, and I will go on. The Government of Canada has also put together a network, important networks like the Genomic COVID-19 Network and the Public Health Laboratories Network to use the capacities that we have now and future capacities and facilities in order to be able to make quick decisions about public health. I'm thinking about quick testing for known variants and a national sequencing strategy about the outbreaks, the monitoring of trends in Canada, and targeted tests like those linked to travel. Testing of all travelers coming into the country is now done, and positive tests are sequenced, and this will help us find variants coming into the country and will give us other measures to help with our border security. Once again, Madam Chair, all those decisions, all those programs and decisions didn't happen overnight. The Cabinet Committee and all the consultations that had to be done happened and gave us some guidance. So once again, I believe that Minister Freeland is the one who could really share interesting information with the committee and would help us write our report. The vaccination strategy in Canada is clear. We want to give shots to as many Canadians as possible, starting with the people who are more at risk of hospitalizations and severe disease. This way of doing things has protected not only those people, but all the people around them. Once again, Madam Chair, vaccination is key and the priority, but we're far from having reached our goal yet, and we have to make sure that Canadians will have the help they need to stay home and be safe. We're receiving more and more approved vaccines, so Canada has the right tools to ramp up vaccination and better protect Canadians. To date, we know that millions of vaccines have been administered, and this work is done in cooperation with provinces and territories. And as I said earlier, all the provinces and territories are working on this and work well. My husband was on a cancellation list last night, and he got his shot. All provinces have priorities, and we're all working together with provinces and territories. So we're working with partners, we're monitoring the situation, and we're learning more about the situation in real time about vaccines efficacy and how to distribute them. And we are sharing all this information. And of course, we want to do this to ensure the safety and security of all. Studies in Australia and the United Kingdom have shown that 2 doses of the RNA vaccines offer good protection with a 90% effectiveness to prevent asymptomatic infections, symptomatic infections, hospitalizations, severe cases.
Relevant. The relevance to this, we are still talking about Mr. Turnbull's motion. It is regarding the prorogation study, and it is regarding having Madam Freeland as well as a few others on there. Perhaps we can get back to that. We are now going very off, Kate. I would hope that as the chair, you will keep the comments relevant.
Okay. I'm in a difficult spot because although I guess you're not seeing the link, I can see the link made to why one might prorogue, but Ms. Petitpas-Taylor is continuing to explain that this is her view of why prorogation had happened. But maybe if we can keep the details of the programs and all of that, I can see how that may be seen as going off on a tangent maybe a little bit as to the details that came out of it, but I can surely see the linkage. So it's difficult for me to make any
point of order,
ruling.
point of order, perhaps you could maybe give us a framework of what would be relevant and irrelevant. I'm wondering if there's timelines, things that have led up to prorogation, because we seem to be talking a lot about things. I'm really happy that Jeanette's husband's getting the vaccine, because I know my husband has it as well. But I think we really need to talk about the actual motion, the prorogation motion. We are talking about everything that we could see in every single standing committee right now. And although I think this is great, we are watching now almost 40 hours of filibustering. And I'm just wondering when we're really going to actually get to a vote, or if we're going to just continue to do this. I mean, honestly, if you're going to allow there to be anything said, as long as it's under the government of Canada, I question that, and I really want to ensure that we're staying on the motion. And as the weeks have progressed, I'm finding that we can talk about almost anything as long as it has to do with the government of Canada and COVID. That is not what this study is. We are studying prorogation, not the response to COVID-19. We're studying the reasons for prorogation. And so that's what we should be getting back to. When the minister is here, we can ask her those questions. Unfortunately, she has yet to even respond. Thank you.
I take that point. As for a framework, I'll think on that and see if I can come up with something. That's an interesting request. I'll see if that's possible for me to do.
To that point of order.
Go ahead.
Is it not the case that COVID-19 was the reason for prorogation? And if that's the case, then Ms. Petitpas-Taylor is bringing up I think relevant information, data, and examples of how COVID-19 may provide the rationale for prorogation, which is something that I think our members have maintained all along. So I fail to see how this is not relevant, to be honest. I'm sorry to differ with Ms. Vecchio, of course, but that is the nature of debate.
I'll take both the points into consideration and see if after talking with the clerk, maybe at a later point today, if there is more better advice or on the side that I can guide you all with. But I'll give the floor at this point to Ms. Petitpas-Taylor, and I can talk and get some advice on that. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Puis je tiens à remercier encore une fois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And once again, I'd like to thank my friend. I like to say my friend, Ms. Vecchio, for her comments. So we're here to discuss the reasons behind an underlying prorogation. But as Ryan, my other colleague and friend, has said, if you were to ask me, the reasons underlying prorogation have to do with the global pandemic. And the comments I am making are all linked to this issue. Now, I know perhaps sometimes my comments may seem rather long to some, but I think it's important that everyone realize that what we're debating today are the reasons why this government in August 2020 chose to prorogue Parliament. And that reason was a global pandemic. And as I said previously, I do truly hope that we'll never have to go through something like this again. But as a government, that's what we had to do. I will still attempt to be brief, but I do want to wrap up my points because I worked on these remarks for a long time, and they are remarks that I want to share with this committee. And so I'll continue. So we know that public health measures have been were effective while awaiting vaccinations. Experiences in other countries show us that sanitary and health measures have to be implemented in order to prevent fast and rapid transmission and to give countries time to vaccinate their citizens. Some countries that had high levels of vaccination saw transmission that was still high because of a loosening of the public health measures. So I think in terms of policies, this is very important. And I think it's very important that we have an opportunity to hear from Minister Freeland for the reasons underlying their decisions. Now, given that many Canadians have still not been vaccinated and that some have received a first dose, it's important that all those citizens, vaccinated or not, continue to follow public health guidelines. We have to continue to practice physical distancing, wearing a mask, and avoiding gatherings, especially inside. This will allow us to stem this epidemic. Public health measures are very important and have been very important during vaccination distribution. It allows for protection. And as we've seen in other countries, if we loosen these measures too quickly, without enough vaccinated people, there could be other outbreaks. And that means that we'll have to continue to adjust to control the infection rate. And that was an outcome of an early study of the vaccination campaign in Israel. Information is being shared at an unprecedented rate, and therefore we are privileged to be able to use this information and use evidence and local epidemiological data to guide us. We must continue to respect public health measures. We will be able to loosen them only when the data shows with certainty that social interactions are not a danger to the public. We have to make sure that the transmission of variants and the seriousness of symptoms and the vaccination rate are all at a level that allow us to adjust public health measures. Madam Chair, I think all the measures and all the policies are important. And I think Ms. Freeland is truly at the heart of all this because she's the Minister of Finance and she has been in touch with various departments that have had to make decisions. And so I think it would be a great opportunity to have her before us at this committee. Currently, it's very important to focus on the work that has been done, and we have to take further steps based on the evidence and based on data. Over the past year, in Canada, we have learned two things. First, we have to work hard to manage this, and everyone, whether it's in the public or whether in our own departments, have to respect public health measures, and we need to vaccinate to limit the number of infected people. I'd like to speak about the vaccination campaign in this country, and I think that's also something else that we should have an opportunity to ask Ms. Freeland about. The Government of Canada has taken a global approach to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic, and the vaccination campaign is a part of that. We are now in phase 2 of the vaccination program. In this month, the rate of vaccination should ramp up considerably. And as the Prime Minister recently announced, Pfizer will be sending doses earlier than we thought. And that means that Canada will be receiving about 50 million doses by the end of June. And thanks to these shipments, all Canadians who want to be vaccinated will have received their first dose by this summer. We will then be in a position to provide the second dose, which will give an even better protection against the virus. And we'll be able to do that by the end of September 2020. Each person in Canada who is eligible and who wants to be vaccinated will be able to be vaccinated. So this vaccination strategy is very important. And all those decisions, I think, could be explained very clearly to us by Ms. Freeland if she were to come before the committee. Now, with the hot weather coming and with vaccinations, Canadians still are uncertain. They want to know how this will affect their own personal situations, even if they do feel relieved. How will they get back to normal? And I think we're all wondering that. What is normal going to look like? Given this, we might be tempted to change our habits. However, The message to Canadians is that it's not time to let our guard down. The virus is still being transmitted in some parts of the country, which means that this is also straining our public health system. Our friends and our families are counting on us to work together. Once again, Madam Chair, if we were to invite Ms. Freeland, she would be able to speak to us about the whole process that they undertook to get to the point that we are at now. There is light at the end of the tunnel, I believe. The vaccines are here, but there is still a lot of work to be done. There is still much support that has to be provided to all Canadian citizens to make sure that we're all protected until the vaccination rate is as high as it should be. So, Madam Chair, I don't want to take all the time today. I have been speaking for a while now. I've had the floor for a while, so I think I'm going to now give the floor to my friend and colleague, Dr. Duncan, who will now have an opportunity to make her remarks. And I always appreciate hearing what she has to say. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms.
Merci, Madame.
Dr. Duncan next, then Mr. Long, and then Mr. Turnbull, and then Mr. Luzon. So, Dr. Duncan, please.
Madam Chair, thank you, and I'd like to thank my honorable friend and colleague for her wonderful remarks. I have Mr. Turnbull is recently back. I know he's eager to speak, so I will pass my time to my friend, Mr. Turnbull.
Thank you, Dr. Duncan. Mr. Long is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to all of my friends and colleagues. Certainly a pleasure to be back on PROC. Looking forward to certainly more discussions today. But Chair, at this time, I'd like to yield my time to Ryan Turnbull.
Go ahead, Mr. Turnbull.
Oh, thanks to my generous colleagues who are graciously giving up their slots or spots in the speakers list to have me speak, and I do appreciate that. Madam Chair, I just wanted to tell you a really quick funny story that before PROC meetings now, I'm bringing up my cappuccino maker because into my office here, just so I have it on hand, because I find I need extra caffeine for these meetings to keep me going. But listen, I appreciate it. I want to make a bit of a plea to my colleagues on the committee. We know that that the Finance Committee is seized with a big responsibility right now, which is to review Bill C-30, the Budget Implementation Act. They have to do this by the end of June. And pieces of that act are being broken up and sort of hived off and given to committees that have a mandate for different sections. There's a section in particular that this committee, that we essentially would be responsible for if you look at the sort of mandate of PROC, which are the changes to the Canada Elections Act. It's Division 37, and it's specifically the section that deals with publishing knowingly false statements that affect an election result. This is a concern that I have, that I know other members of this committee have expressed, both in the past, and I know there's been quite a lot of debate in past parliaments about this particular issue. And the word knowingly, I think, is one of the hot button issues. With the recent Ontario Superior Court decision, I think there's some reason to study this. I think that the Finance Committee would have a very hard time if PROC doesn't actually undertake some work on this topic to help them meet their deadline. And it is within our mandate, within the standing orders. I believe it's 108.3 Section 6. I have it here somewhere that basically says PROC is responsible for studying anything to do with the election of members of Parliament. So I think it is within our mandate. So in this regard, I think it's really our duty to move on to doing some work on this particular issue. And I think we could hear from witnesses and have some meaningful discussion about this. So I want to move that the committee proceed to the following motion: that the committee, pursuant to Standing Order 108.3.6, the chair write to the chair of the Standing Committee on Finance, indicating that the Committee on Procedure and House Affairs wishes to conduct a study on the amendments to the Canada Elections Act contained in Bill C-30, that the committee shall hold a minimum of 3 meetings, each for a minimum of 2 hours, that the first witness called shall be the Chief Electoral Officer. The witness list must be provided to the clerk no later than Friday, May 7th, that the report from the committee on this study shall be referred to the Standing Committee of Finance not later than the timeline received from the Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Just if you could give me, if everyone on the committee can just give me a second, and I just wanted to review something.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Yeah. I think we would take this as a notice of motion. I don't think you can move a motion such as this in the middle of when another motion is on the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nader. If you can all just give me a moment. Is there something, did somebody want to debate that point, and then maybe I can take it all back to the clerk?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say I believe my motion is a dilatory motion that would move immediately to a vote, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Thank you. I'll be right back if you guys can all give me a minute. Mr. Turnbull, can I ask you to email in both official languages a copy of that motion to the clerk and myself? And at this point, having heard what you have said, it's not, and what Mr. Nader has said, I view it as not being a debate on the actual motion, and that if the committee was to choose to vote and move to a different order of business for the day, that then you would move the actual substantive motion. So at this point, a vote to move to another subject matter is seen as a dilatory motion that is not debatable, and we would just be moving to see if we are going to move to another order. But that order has not, the substantive motion would not be moved until the committee agrees to move to that. Monsieur Thérien. Monsieur Thérien?
Oui, je m'excuse, je ne sais pas si vous m'entendez.
Can you hear me well? I have two motions that I've been waiting to table for quite a while, so I'm really surprised that we're dealing with a motion when we're debating another motion. And I've been patiently waiting for a long time with my two motions. I have a lot of respect for the committee's work. My two motions are waiting, and as long as we're debating Mr. Turnbull's amendment and Ms. Vecchio's motion, because I respect the committee's work, I keep patiently waiting, and I don't know why the Liberals can't do the same.
I hear your point. Yes, you do have your three motions, actually. You have three motions that have been properly put on notice.
Oui, mais je m'excuse.
You have three motions.
Je m'excuse, mais juste vous dire que j'en enlèverai une le moment venu. C'est pour ça que je vous dis deux. Mais vous avez absolument raison.
When the time comes, I'll only move two. I'll only move two motions.
So I've heard that happening in other committees, and that is what I'm anticipating if we get to that point. But you properly have on notice three motions here. There are many other motions other members have. There's approximately 10 motions on notice at this committee that could be moved to. And at any point, I believe anybody can move a dilatory motion to move to those if they wish. To move to another order of the day if they wish, and then we would debate. I think the committee would then be able to debate which order of business they'd like to move to. So at this point, there would be a vote on whether you would like to move to another order, and at that point only would Mr. Turnbull have the opportunity perhaps to move his motion. So we have got a couple of hands up. So Ms. Vecchio and then Mr. Blakey. You're muted.
Sorry about that. I was just trying to lower my hand. I should not be on. I should not be on.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Vecchio. Mr. Blakey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think I'm just trying to get a better appreciation of what exactly is going on. There seems to me to be at least two ways that this motion is out of order. In the first case, typically if you're proposing a new study or you have any kind of substantive motion, it's part of our routine motions that were passed at the beginning of the committee that you have to give 48 hours notice, and I don't believe that notice has been given. So my sense is that the motion is out of order in that sense. And then the second sense in which I think it may be out of order is that I don't see how it's a dilatory motion. I think there are a few kinds of typical dilatory motions that are outlined in the House procedure. One is that the committee do now adjourn. Another is that the debate be now adjourned. And the third is that the committee proceed to another order of business. But there is no order of business that's been given any notice for. So it doesn't seem to me that a dilatory motion can be used as a way to shoehorn in a new order of business that there's been no due notice given for, because otherwise we could do this all day, right? I mean, we could just all bring whatever we want to talk about to the floor in the form of a dilatory motion, which I think would really undermine the routine motion that was passed in terms of at least giving notice. But I think you find with the number of motions that are on the table that members may decide that being able to raise any potential issue of study in the form of a dilatory motion becomes a way of doing business. So I would just offer that word of caution that I think the ruling here about whether this motion as it's being presented is in order could have a considerable amount of significance for this committee in this session of Parliament, but also because the Procedure and House Affairs Committee is the committee that other committees look to for guidance on how to conduct their business. This is the kind of ruling that could have a considerable ripple effect in the way that all committees of the House conduct their business. And I understand that this is not the only committee experiencing a filibuster. So it may, I think your ruling is important in this regard. I think it's important to get it right. I would urge you not to rush. I don't think anybody can accuse the committee of rushing to anything recently. And so I don't see any value in this case from departing
from the culture that's been set. And I would encourage you to take time to reflect on the nature of this motion and the consequences of having us deal with it in the way that Mr. Turnbull is proposing. Thank you.
Mr. Blakey, you raised some really good points, and I actually, you definitely had me thinking there. So moving to another order of business while we're in committee business, the notice requirement is not when we are generally in committee business, you can bring forward you can bring forward other motions without the notice requirement that's generally needed when we are in committee business. And since that's what we are in, it would be in order, but only if the dilatory motion was to be passed. I don't foresee which way that would go at this point anyways, but to move to another order of day would be seen as a dilatory order. And perhaps the clerk, I'll have the clerk maybe supplement what I'm saying or add to what I'm saying, because he obviously can maybe state it in a slightly different way, which might make more sense to all the members. So go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Madam Chair, I don't necessarily have a lot more to add to that, other than to reiterate the point about committee business, which generally, when a committee is meeting under committee business, and currently for meeting 27, the item of business that the committee has been engaged in is committee business, even though the committee has been debating Ms. Vecchio's motion and Mr. Turnbull's amendment. That would suggest that other possible proposals for the committee to work on, such as the notices of motion that we already have, including now this new suggestion by Mr. Turnbull, would not need to meet the notice requirement. The means in which Mr. Turnbull is suggesting his current motion, it would be to move to essentially another order of the day, which would, if successful, drop the committee back into committee business, which would open the floor for his new suggestion for a motion. And the way in which he has proposed it, it would essentially replace the current item that is currently under debate with his new suggestion that he has brought forward at this point. First step, however, of course, is for the committee to decide, in fact, if they want to move to a new order of business.
So, Mr. Clerk, if you can help us with a vote on this, then.
Madam Chair, the question would be on moving to a new order of business. Madame Petitpas-Taylor.
Yes.
Dr. Duncan.
Yes.
Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Oui.
Mr. Sims.
Yes.
Ms. Vecchio.
No.
Mr. Lakiski.
No.
Mr. Nader.
No.
Mr. Kent.
No.
Monsieur Terrien.
No.
Mr. Blakey.
No.
Yeas 5, Madam Chair. Nays 6. Motion is defeated.
Okay, so we are back on the amendment, and the floor is back with
Point
Mr.
of order,
Turnbull.
Madam Chair.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, just a couple things. Sorry. Could we just not go to a vote now? Could we not just go to a vote on this motion now? If the Liberals are obviously saying they want to move forward, can we not move forward now then if they want to get off this? If they're
I can definitely survey the committee and see if the committee would like to move to a vote on the amendment. Okay. Would the committee like to move to a vote on the amendment? I see a lot of yeses.
Yeah.
And some no's. Okay. Is there unanimous, is there consent or consensus to move towards the vote?
Yes.
Yes?
No.
Yes.
No.
No.
We have
Oui.
more to say.
Okay. All right. We still have a speaker's list on the actual amendment. So since the amendment is the debatable amendment, a debatable motion, we'll continue with the speaker's list. And perhaps there'll be a point where everyone will want to see a vote, or the speaker on the list will want to see a vote. Ms. Vecchio?
I'm just going to ask, on point of order, after a vote, does it go to the next speaker, or does it remain with the speaker who called the vote? I just know a lot, or no? Just a question on procedure.
It would go back to whoever had the floor.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure. Perfect.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
If there was a vote on the amendment, we would drop the speakers list that we have currently on the amendment, and we'd move to the main motion.
A point of order,
Nader?
Chair. Yeah, just my understanding is when a member moved a dilatory motion that it would go to the next speaker, and I could be mistaken, and perhaps the clerk could clarify, because I have been mistaken a few times in my life. You know, for example, I cheer for the Leafs, and that's usually a big mistake. So I just need clarity on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That's a point of order right there, Mr. Nader. Come on.
Sorry, I was just saying a lot of people can commiserate and relate to you with that one, Mr. Nader, and I could also be wrong, so let me double check on that, okay? My apologies, Mr. Nader, you are correct. So there's only a few times I guess you have been incorrect. So thanks. No, thanks for pointing that out. Mr. Luzon, the floor would go to you now.
Merci. Thank you, everyone. It's been a long time that I didn't speak in this committee. Thanks for all your kind word for the last few days or last few weeks. I'm so happy to be back in 110% of my shape, and I think that it is very important for this debate to be here in good conditions, and I'm ready to go on. And I appreciate all my colleagues, all the comment from people who talked before me, and the amazing job of Jeanette do today. And Jeanette, you put the table on. It was directly related to the situation that we are living right now. It's all about COVID. It's about the speech of throne. It's about the prime minister's decisions, and I think that today the debate is maybe related to the amendment from Ryan to the initial motion from Madame Vecchio, but it's all related. And today I would like to talk to you about different things. First of all, I just want to put the table on why we are here and why today we have to speak against about this motions and talk about this amendment. And I would like to talk after that about what we could do in this meeting, that it's very valuable for us to go forward with different issue. And maybe at the end, if I had time, I would like to finish with a wrap up of the analysis that I make since I started in this committee, why we should receive why we should not receive the prime minister and receive the vice prime minister. And it's been difficult for me to step back and look at this committee without coming in and do all my comment. Now, I will switch in French because it's easier for me to speak for a long time in French. So I'm ready to speak. So you will have to switch with translation.
For me to leave this meeting or this committee and come back to where I had high expectations. I'll be honest with you, in the situation I was in, I really didn't have contacts with my colleagues. I took care of my health and I set everything aside. And as soon as I was back, it was an effort for me to not do this because I had never been through this in my career. And for the first time, I had a convalescence period, and I had never thought that someone like me could be so sick. So this is just to tell you before I start that we're not invincible and that we have to take care of our own health, and that it is very important to do our work, but to do it when we're healthy. So I can tell you that when I came back to the committee, my biggest disappointment that we were still on Ryan's amendment, not because I have anything against him, but because this amendment should have been consensus, should have given rise to a consensus, and the committee should have made progress, and the committee should have been working on something else. I had very, very high expectations for the committee's work. So the first thing I did when I came back to the committee was to make sure that I could analyze everything. And to work with the committee, you will understand that I come from the private sector. In the private sector, we work like 200 miles an hour. We work proactively. We have to innovate. We have to be forward-looking. We have to make a lot of decisions. We're, very active. And I get here in this committee, and I was very ambitious. I had high expectations, and I'm faced with a situation that, frankly, I'm sad to be debating this. Like, many attempts were made in other committees as well to make sure that the We Charity issue would not be upfront anymore, because the real reason at the start, I looked at all the reports and all the questions because I wasn't in the committee at the time.
I just wanted to inform you that Mr. Kent has dropped off the call. I believe that we may have people coming back and forth just to ensure, because we are having some technological glitches here. So I just wanted to inform you.
Yeah. Okay. And then seeing what just happened a little while ago, maybe we should wait for Mr. Kent to get back on. Would that make you more comfortable, Ms. Vecchio?
I see that Mr. Williamson has joined, so perhaps Mr. Williamson has joined in place of Mr. Kent, but I just want to know because I'm seeing all of the different members going through these kind of connection problems today.
Okay.
Yes, I'm subbing in.
You're subbing in for Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Okay. So you've got one, where is, okay, Mr. Nader just has his camera off, that's it. And yes, he's there.
And Mr. Kent's just coming back on, if you see that too,
Okay.
so.
Mr. Nader don't want to see me.
Apologies, Chair. I've got a Rogers Tech virtually at the door, and we'll try and correct this, but
yeah,
I'm here for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kent, you want me to repeat the introduction?
No, I think I'm clear on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I did. No surprise there. Okay, so we'll
I was
resume.
about halfway of my introduction.
We'll resume, Mr. Luzon, and it really is such a pleasure to have you back. And thank you for the reminder about not being invincible. You're so right about that. Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for your kind word also. J'étais en train de vous dire que.
So I was saying, to get back to work, I had to read all of the questions and the answers, all the questions that you asked in committee of the witnesses. And the questions at the time were already targeting We Charity. And I know quite well what the political game is. I've been linked to politics for 30 years in one way or another, but what I know today is that it's very simple, and I told you I'm ready to debate as long as necessary. As a government, whether it be a minority government or majority government, still has to be accountable, and the government was chosen to make decisions that a government must make. And the population's choice was the Liberals. And I understand all the political games that the other parties will get into, but as a parliamentarian, for me, in this COVID-19 situation, we should set partisanship aside and work directly on very important files that are on the table. When I came back, I wanted to ask where things were, and I asked how many motions we had, and I've lost count. I thought we only had 6 or 7, including Mr. Terrien's motion. He wants to withdraw, but we have 10 motions on the table. We have 10 motions on the table, and we're still on Mr. Turnbull's amendment. Contrary to Jeanette and Ryan, at first I didn't agree with this motion. I thought that we should have simply gotten rid of Mrs. Vecchio's motion and gone forward to other things, but we have to be collegial, and my colleagues convinced me to agree to Ryan's motion. And at this point, given all the questions we've asked, the answers we got, the questions we asked of Mr. Rodriguez, leader of the government in the House, we're still agreeing to see the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. And I'm surprised that this is still debated today. As parliamentarians, we should concentrate on the pandemic. Mrs. Petipa-Taylor set the table earlier by explaining all the reasons linked to the pandemic that led to what we're doing. And listen, it is late now, 15 months into this pandemic, and there are still new cases in my riding because we have red zones, we still have restaurants that are closed, many businesses that are closed because of COVID-19 in my own riding. All this because the hospitals are full. Even if the stats are improving for older people, we know that there are variants that are now affecting younger people. This week in my riding, all teachers will be vaccinated, but this was explained very well by Jeanette. Even if we have only one shot, we can't let go. We can't stop fighting because the whole system is affected, and we have to make the right decisions. Ryan's motion, after the discussions we've had with the chair and the chair of the Finance Committee, mean that this motion is important, and we have to deal with this because of COVID once again, and it would make sense to have a break now and talk about other things and come back to Ryan's amendment. But I can understand the political game surrounding this. I just want to mention that we are still in the midst of a pandemic. People are forgetting about it because the weather is improving. It will be nice outside. People will want to meet. But in reality, Canadians are focusing on issues that are more important than what we're dealing with here now. And this is why I want to make a link with the calls we make. I call people. I'm a regular caller. I call people in my riding. I have teams that come and help me. I have lots of volunteers. I call a lot of people and I talk to people. And from all the calls that I get, I can tell you that there is not one person in the thousands of calls I've made or gotten in the last month since last August. There is not one person who talked about the prorogation, its importance, and the 6 weeks during which we were stopped. And nobody has talked to me about the importance of having the Prime Minister at our committee to discuss the prorogation, that the opposition has already decided what it was all about and the reason for it. There's not one single soul who is thinking about that. And I can tell you, after having called thousands of people, that's the best survey you can have in my riding. There's absolutely nobody who wants to talk about this situation. My fellow citizens, Canadians, have many more important things that they do want to talk about or hear about. And it is all the measures that we are putting in place to fight the pandemic and to help them. Canadians are focused on the millions of doses that we are getting. That's what's important. They want to know when it will be their turn to get their shot. This is what I hear. In Quebec, we have an internet website to make appointments. People want to know, when will it be my turn? When will it be the turn for my age group? This is what people are talking about. They're not talking about prorogation. They're not talking about amendments, and even less about We Charity. They don't care about that. Canadians are focusing on vaccine doses that have been delivered this week. They want to know how many cases there are in the hospital, how many deaths happened, what will we do to help the industry. In all of our ridings, we have businesses and tourism, for instance. I'm in a rural riding, and tourism is very important. It's going to be the season for tourism soon. I have lots of festivals in my riding, and this in itself is an industry. Culture, music, shows, outdoor activities, all that is part of the culture in Argenteuil-Petite-Nation, and all that is stopped right now. This is what people are concerned about. They want to know when we'll reopen day camps, for instance. This is what they're asking. They want to know if kids will be sent to day camps this summer, if there will be summer jobs in day camps or not. Nobody is concerned about Ryan Turnbull's amendment. Is it relevant in the PROC committee? And is it relevant to talk about prorogation of Parliament?
That's not what the reality is right now. Now, this is just an introduction for me. There's much that I want to share with you. I just want to tell you how important it is in my riding to speak about real life, to speak about those things that affect all Canadians. Today, people want to talk about the economic recovery. They want to know how we as a government are going to help the economy recover locally, their economies in each of our ridings, in each of our provinces. So it's important that we come together and that we work together for the economic recovery so that we have a strong Canada, so that we can create jobs, so that we can work directly and closely with people so that we can help them and so that we can help them get back on their feet after this crisis. Because we're not out of the woods yet. At this point in time, there's nothing to indicate that there are going to be Christmas parties and that things are just going to be like they always were before. Many things will have changed. Our way of doing things will have changed, and the government has to accompany everyone during this process. As MPs, we need to do that, and we need to find solutions. We need to figure out how we're going to navigate this new economy. And these are words that we're not used to using because we don't usually use them. We only use them after things like wars and pandemics or catastrophic crises. And so as Canadians, what we have to do is get back on our feet after this pandemic, move on from the motion and pass Mr. Turnbull's amendment. So let's be clear. Karen, I have the utmost of respect for you. But really, it's very difficult to say this. This is a way to kind of keep this file scandal going. And this is sort of a last-ditch effort to try and make something stick to the Prime Minister, to put him in a vulnerable situation, in a situation that is already so difficult. And other committees have already listened closely to testimony, have already considered this, and there is nothing there to prove that anything inappropriate happened. Now, I understand that that's upsetting to the opposition. I know that it's difficult to have to say, gosh, we didn't find anything. And there's been very little publicity around this. And this is sort of an effort to revive this, to try and pump some life back into this issue. And it's not working. And it's upsetting to the opposition. I understand that. However, this game has to stop at some point in time. And listen, rather than tackling issues that truly do affect Canadians, we have this before us. And yet there are so many important issues that we could be looking at as a committee. Right now we have a long list of things to do. Mr. Blakey said that there were other things that we should be looking at. However, how could we have known that there would be these points on the agendas of various committees? No one has a crystal ball. We're really working on a day-to-day basis, and Mr. Turnbull brought his amendment forward to be able to help everyone. And right now we're not helping anyone. The Finance Committee passed a motion that could have been debated here, actually, that would have been very relevant. We could have been debating something here and sent it back to the Finance Committee. However, here we have before us a motion and an amendment that is preventing us from moving on to these other things. And I'd like to come back to a list of points that show why we need to move on from this motion and its amendment. Madam Chair, the real situation right now is that the opposition can't stand the fact that all their efforts, all this energy is getting them nowhere. And I understand that that's difficult for the opposition. And we feel that. However, and we understand that. However, the public does not, because this isn't their reality. It's not really getting a lot of attention, you know, in your ridings. Here we are debating an amendment that would require witnesses to come forward and speak about something that has already been spoken about in other committees. And in all these committees, the same thing was being said. So it would only be more repetition. And it would just be another opportunity to have a question on the record in the hopes of showing that there was some kind of an attempt at something. But seriously, it would just be in an attempt to harm the government. This was a context where there was COVID-19. Now, perhaps the situation would be different if that wasn't the case. We don't know when there's going to be an election. We have to do important work, for instance, C-19, and so many other things. We're supposed to be looking at rules and procedures for things like the House of Commons and Elections Canada, and we have to be considering these issues. That's what we should be talking about. Now, I understand that Ryan's amendment was very important to debate for a few meetings, perhaps 2 or 3 or 4, and it would have been a small step towards being able to talk, for instance, about Elections Canada. But I'm sure that doing this would be, and I'm sure rather, that doing this would open the door to being able to further consider the issue about how to conduct elections safely, for example, how to give Canadians an opportunity to vote safely and to have trust in the process, and to show them that they have the opportunity to safely exercise their rights within a democracy. Civil servants and politicians have worked very hard over the past 15 months. Countless hours have been spent making sure that programs are available to help Canadians who were experiencing very difficult circumstances and still are. Now, nothing's perfect, of course. There have been many meetings where we've had an opportunity to speak about these things. In the House, for example, many questions have been asked about the pandemic. Obviously, we had to adjust as we went along, because our main goal was to help as many Canadians as possible. And mistakes have been made. Nothing's perfect. So yes, mistakes have been made. And the Prime Minister was the first to admit this. That is, that there have been some mistakes. It's so important to get through this amendment so that we can move on to debating real issues. Let me give you an example of one mistake. One morning, I got up and I'd received several emails telling me that a traveler coming back from the south was going to be getting $1,000 in compensation coming back from his trip, even though this trip was optional. Well, it wasn't. This had been debated in the House, and it's not only. There wasn't only one point. There were three. This was one of them. And we saw that non-essential travel was happening. And I don't blame any civil servants for this. I don't blame anyone. You know, we've had to reinvent the system. And we've had this motion before us, and now Ryan Turnbull's amendment. And if we were to move on from this, we would be able to get back to our real work so that we don't drop any more balls, so that we don't make any more mistakes, so that we can work together. For example, making sure that the next elections are going to be safe. Obviously, I'm going to be standing up for seniors. I'm the parliamentary secretary for seniors. And in the next election, there are still seniors in my riding who are going to have to travel 250 kilometers to be able to vote. They live in remote areas, and they can't necessarily get into a car with someone. They can't drive. And we're in a red zone. So they can't be accompanied because of social distancing. Even if people wear masks in a car, they're not 2 meters apart. So there are so many questions that I would like to be able to ask, so many issues I would like to be able to work on with the committee so that we can set the best standards possible to send on to Elections Canada. It's all very well to say, well, we'll put these We'll put these 50 kilometers away. We'll put areas to vote 50 kilometers away. However, even that in these remote areas are not accessible. You know, you can't just send a worker with a 2x4 there to make an access ramp so that the school or the community center is accessible. That's just not the reality out there. It's all very well to build a little ramp, but oftentimes inside, for example, there are steps that you have to walk up, and there's no system to deal with that. So we need to think about these kinds of things. We need to think about solutions. And that requires innovative thinking. That requires a committee that can actually work. You know, for over 40 hours, we've been debating this and this amendment. Why? Why? You said it yourselves. There's no way out at this point. There's no way forward except by having the Prime Minister. And so that's why we're just going to be debating this forever and ever and ever and not being able to move forward to something else.
Juste revenir à nos fonctionnaires.
I'd like to get back to our officials. In my improvised speech, because I haven't prepared anything, but I wanted to tell you about our officials. I'm so grateful for them. They prepared the throne speech with the Prime Minister's office, and they were proactive during the whole pandemic. They've been thinking about programs and having to work with programs which are not adapted to to special measures, just the income tax, the change we made to the income tax report date. So, of course, mistakes were made, but I think we all dropped the ball, really. But we were trying to do the best faced with this crisis. We tried to act too quickly, and we made mistakes. And I just want to point out that I am not I'm not pointing the finger at any of the officials. They've been doing a remarkable work since the beginning of this crisis, which only proves that we, politicians, without the officials, we couldn't do anything. There are officials who have been in their position for 30, 35 years, and they've worked with a lot of politicians because politicians come and go. And we do our best to fulfill the needs of our voters by asking the officials to adjust, to make changes, to implement ideas. And we're trying to improve the system as we go along. But today we have a great opportunity to improve the system. The election system, for example. Because Ryan's amendment would have been a good opportunity to invite someone, and Jeanette has been telling us about Ms. Freeland. If we could have Ms. Freeland for us, she is the perfect person, the perfect witness. She's the finance minister. She can answer all our questions. I'm ready to support Ryan and Jeanette in this because that amendment, well, in the beginning, I wasn't really sure that the Deputy Prime Minister should appear before our committee after everything that was said in the other committees. But I can see now that to question the Deputy Prime Minister, to ask her the hard questions, difficult questions, she would be ready to answer our questions. Did she answer our invitation? Well, first of all, we should vote on the amendment. We should pass the amendment before inviting the Deputy Prime Minister. We're not going to invite her if we don't pass the motion or the amendment. We should start with a motion, Ryan's amendment. So once we've passed that amendment, we can invite the Deputy Prime Minister and see if she can come. And then we can move forward and analyze all the other motions that are waiting, and we'll be able to get on with other studies that are also important. I still remember the very beginning, the first wave of the pandemic. At that time, we were doing crazy hours. We were working at the house and committees and our writing. And at the end of the day, we were wondering, is this real? Is this going to go on a month, 2 months? And we were watching what was happening elsewhere and all the deaths. And we were wondering who we were going to save between patient number 1 and patient number 2. That's how it was elsewhere. We were wondering if it's going to be the same thing here in Canada. We were asking ourselves these questions. And 15 months later, the pandemic is still going on, and we've just wasted 30, 40 hours that could have been used dealing with real issues because we don't want to agree to invite the deputy prime minister, who's also the finance minister. I don't understand it. At the end of last fall, yes, in the fall, after hearing many witnesses, after reading countless pages of documents, because I didn't just take into account the testimonies or what was in the committee's report. I went to see what happened elsewhere in other committees, and the questions were basically the same ones. The witnesses were the same ones. And the accusations regarding We Charity were the same. The objective was to talk about We Charity. But 15 months later, it's not what's important. What's important today is to look forward. We know there's an election coming. We know there's going to be a recovery, an economic recovery in all our ridings. It's going to be crucial. And we need to take an environmental turn. But we're very lucky. We're among the people who can make a difference in Canada. And I believe, well, I don't necessarily have the same political experience that you all have, but I can give you a piece of advice. And the best piece of advice I can give you, if you want to change things, you have to work. That's what my father used to say. And if we want to do the work, we have to pass this amendment and get on with the work.
Never let the Prime Minister come to this meeting. C'est inconcevable.
It's inconceivable. I could never allow that. I won't let it happen. And I think if we can hear the Deputy Prime Minister, that would be great. And we're going to continue debate. We're going to go on with the debate as long as it takes. I was comparing the beginning of the pandemic and today's situation. The situation right now is very different in my riding and in your ridings too, I'm sure. Because now we're going to deal with the post-pandemic recovery. But right now we see that costs have gone up for softwood. The cost of housing has gone up. People are becoming more and more. People have higher debts. Now, with some of our programs, a lot of Canadians no longer live in poverty, but we could be faced with a global recession. So we have to keep on working. We have to do our utmost to help Canadians go through these difficult times. So as I was saying, I read all these testimonies that the various committees received, and I could see that the opposition realized that this was going nowhere, because in this committee and in the other committees, the questions that were asked, the questions that were raised, did not bring any answers. It was all in vain. And in the other committees, they moved on. But here, we're still debating this. And it's not because we want to be debating Ryan's amendment. The main motion, which was like all the others on We Charity, has nothing to do with prorogation. We have shown clearly that, and even witnesses who said that they were asked about how is this, isn't this a way to brush or try to hide the We scandal? Even the witnesses said that the prorogation wasn't a bad idea because it allowed for a reset. And at the time, we didn't know that, after 15 weeks, we would still be in the middle of a third wave. And if the pandemic wasn't a good enough reason for the prorogation, I don't know why these witnesses said at the time that prorogation was for another reason. I want to be careful with what I say, but, it was almost comical. It was certainly strange to hear all those questions on We Charity. And we couldn't even give our opinions. It was all about We Charity. And as various witnesses said, constitutional conventions are such that the Prime Minister is the one who decides if there's going to be a prorogation.
According to the rules, he could just ask for prorogation in this extreme situation. And it was probably the only prime minister who decided to do so in a way that a report could be written about it later on, explaining the reasons for the prorogation. And this could have just put an end to... It could have put an end to the discussion and closed that loop. The Prime Minister justified for Canadians why the prorogation happened. Here are the reasons. But now, I understand that the Prime Minister appeared, or rather gave his reasons. The report was written, and Mr. Rodriguez also talked on behalf of the government, but it seems like this is never enough. Nothing is ever enough. It's just a political game, and I understand it very well. In all of this, we also understood, well, I didn't know what a prorogation was. I learned all about it then. But what I've learned is that the Prime Minister doesn't even have to have a reason to prorogue. He doesn't have to justify the fact that he's asking for a prorogation. This is not even in the legal standards or rules that a Prime Minister has to justify the prorogation. He did so because he's all for transparency. But today, in the context, or under the pretext of justifying prorogation, we have this. It's not the main reason. What people really want to do is find scandals that have been studied time and over in other committees, just one more time in our committee. They want to see how resistant the system can be. They're trying to break politically by finding some problem that doesn't exist. In the history of our country, what I've learned about prorogation is that it has been used to have a reset. And this is the explanation. It was just a reset. We wanted to go back to the beginning to have a reset of the agenda for Parliament. And how could I explain it? It's between... And this time between prorogation and the speech from the throne, this period has had a variable length. This time, it was in August, it was just 6 weeks, just 2 days of sitting of Parliament. But when it was important for politicians to work together to stimulate the economy and to compensate for a need that we could see, we did that. I heard today again about a restaurant that is getting closed, and I'm so sorry that this small restaurant in a village is going to disappear. Its name is La Barque, the boat. And all this because we haven't gotten through this pandemic yet. It is important when a small restaurant in a village closes its doors. We have to find solutions. We have to find a way to pass this amendment so that we can say as parliamentarians, as members of parliament, that we can make a difference.
Bien. C'est la raison.
This is the main reason why we've been elected. To make a difference. Now, I was talking about the time between prorogation and the speech from the throne. This period of time, this delay. I find that it's very interesting that the opposition is using that period of time, that delay of September, is using it to say that it is linked to We Charity. It's the same questions that kept coming back, and we can see it in the report, and it was the same at the Finance Committee. Witnesses are telling us that we were too late, that we should be removing the snow before it has fallen onto the ground. And we should have announced the prorogation knowing that in other countries, there was a virus called the coronavirus. Some people have told us that we were too late, that we had waited too long, and that we always wait too long for everything. But on the other hand, what we want is to make the best possible decisions. We have to work with experts, with public health. We are consulting. And the COVID-19 pandemic didn't come with an instructions manual. And I just want to make a reference to how we can work better, how it is important for us to prepare for other catastrophes after the COVID. So we should take all those motions that are waiting there, and we have to discuss the great ideas that you may have before I got here. And what the best motion is how to work on the best things to do in case of a catastrophe, not talk about COVID precisely, how important it is for Canadians for us to work on being useful. I want to be useful in my work. I want to be able to say that I changed things, that I made a difference. I worked on a manual that would help the government act better in case of a pandemic. Let's find what lessons we can from this experience and ask questions of true experts, of people who were affected by this in the population. I would bring witnesses like the ferry that could never access any program for just one reason, and that is that the year before the pandemic, it didn't have any figures because compensation for COVID was based on figures from the previous year. But the previous year, there was a flood, so that company, that ferry, didn't have any figures. So it was not eligible for programs. Could we do better than that? There was no compensation at all. And I had to explain this to the citizen of my riding that, he fell through the cracks. And it's not because I'm a Liberal that I have any advantages. I'm a Canadian, and we're all Canadians here. The day after the election, we're all helping Canadians the same way, all Canadians. If I'm Liberal, it's because of that. It's because of my convictions, of what I believe in, my capacity to be serving all of my constituents and all Canadians, whether they're from my riding or from Calgary. A Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. Now, how can we do better? What are the best practices? Well, the best thing would be to get to something else. I understand the political game here, but it's not true that I will take responsibility as an MP, as a member of PROC, as proud as I am to be a member of PROC, to say that today, if we're here, after 40-some hours of debate, it is my fault if we're not going forward. It would be unreasonable. The government was elected by Canadians, and I will not accept for the Prime Minister to come be a witness here after so many attempts elsewhere. So this was just a parenthesis on the economy, and I just wanted to tell you how procedures are important in my eyes. In a small municipality like mine, we have had floods, and I thought about it when I was mentioning the ferry, and it's just to prove that I didn't write this speech. Just wanted to mention this experience and how it's important to go ahead with Ryan's amendment. In my riding, some municipalities had terrible floods. The Canadian government sent in the army. We did that. We helped people get out of their houses with helicopters, for instance. Those people left their animals behind, their horses, their cattle, their dogs, their cats, because we had to save people and not animals. Those decisions are very hard to make as MPs when we're working with the army to save citizens, Canadian citizens. How can we do better? Those small municipalities with very little staff worked with municipal regional instances. In 2017, we worked together to find a way to make the best possible decisions and to say that if we have floods again, how can we do better? Can we be proactive? Let's look at the timeline. Could we next time get the animals off the farm, or could we ensure that they're cared for? On some farms, we couldn't get to the farms to feed the cattle. In some dairy farms, we didn't have trucks to carry the milk, so the milk was thrown in the river. Are there things that we can do better in procedures and in decision making? But imagine those small municipalities. They've created documents with the regional authorities, documents about procedures in case of catastrophes, and I've worked with them, especially the small municipalities, to find solutions, to find sandbags.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, Ms. Gladue?
I'm not sure what the relevance of all the animals and, it's to Old MacDonald had a farm maybe, but not to the prorogation motion that we're talking about. So if the member, perhaps you could remind him to make it relevant.
Okay, Ms. Gladue. I'll remind the member to relate it back to Mr. Turnbull's amendment, the comments that he's making.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It is so to give example about exactly what's happened in my riding. And because if we go forward with the amendment, Ryan's amendment, we could take good decision like the one we take in my riding and give example about what happened in my riding. It's so important for me. It's so important for me because if we don't have example, we can just stay on this amendment as long as we can talk hours and hours. And for me, to give great example, like directly related to Canadian, it's very important for me. Maintenant,
So now we have to understand the importance. We have to work with the community. We have to find better procedures and be forward-looking. So do you know what happened in 2019, 2 years after those flood procedures were put in place? Well, we had more floods. We were hit again in 2019. Imagine 2 years after, people were still rebuilding their basements and people were still putting their houses on stilts, and construction workers were still working on rebuilding houses. We were working with the province to establish which flood zones would be on the map, and then we were flooded again. And the first thing we're talking about floods from 2019. I think that this happened well before the prorogation and the pandemic, and I have empathy for you. We had floods in my riding as well, but I think this would be good for another committee, maybe.
Normandin. And if the member can please, I know it's important to you, and we can all see why this issue is important to you, but if you can relate it back to the issue of prorogation in 2020.
Comment il est
2019,
important?
sorry.
Ouais, 2019.
Yeah.
No, 2020. But comment,
2020, I'm so confused myself now.
Merci, Madame Normandin.
Thank you, Ms. Normandin, for your point of order. But this gives me an opportunity to tell you how important it is to go forward with our work in this committee. If we didn't have this motion, if we were to move on, we would be able to move on to these important issues. Now, on a small scale, I've experienced many issues in my ridings. There are 9 municipalities. We have farms, houses, businesses. And so these catastrophes, I think, deserve attention. I'm not talking about the Second World War. I'm talking about 2019. And what I'm saying is that we had just freshly come out of these floods right into a pandemic that required all the energy of that community. And so we need to move on with Ryan's amendment so that we can look at the flaws in our system to see how we can improve that system and how we can better face the next pandemic if there is another one, or the next humanitarian catastrophe. And perhaps the solution will be Canadian pharmaceutical hubs so that we can be independent when it comes to vaccine production. Perhaps that's a solution. And we are so well positioned to be able to speak about this. But allow me just to finish with my comparison. The first thing in 2019 that these small municipalities did was this. They dusted off a book, and this book was an emergency manual for flooding, and we started on page 1. And practically all the answers were there. Crisis management in 2019 was well done. We didn't need to lift people out of there with helicopters. We didn't need to have these work chains for sandbags. We knew what to do. There weren't any shortages of sand, workers, volunteers. Everything was there. Everything was ready. And why? Because we had established those procedures. Now, when you come into a pandemic like this one, it is so important as a committee, such as our own, to move forward and to find solutions. I have the utmost respect for everything you've already done. And I have the utmost respect for all the witnesses who came forward on various issues since the beginning of this Parliament. However, if we're going to be a responsible committee, I would say this, and allow me, Madam Chair, first to say that we have to set aside almost everything. Partisanship, motions, amendments, the motion on the table. We all have to sit down tomorrow morning, everyone, and deal with the COVID crisis together. We need to immediately think about what's coming. First of all, we know there's an election that's coming. We don't know when, but we know there will be one day. And no one in this committee can ask any questions about this because we're on Ryan's amendment. But we need to know what we're going to do during the next election. What are the health measures that will be taken? And what are the best health measures to implement? I think this committee is in the best position to be able to decide those kinds of things and to figure out how to improve our system after a pandemic. So we should be using this time to put our energy in the right place, and that can only benefit all Canadians. And listen, between the prorogation and the speech from the throne in September, I'm sorry, but it's no longer topical to be speculating on the We charity file. In the fall of 2008, now I know Ms. Gladue doesn't like that I go back too far in time. However, I think it's important to point out that at that time there was a prorogation. And this prorogation lasted weeks before the House came back. So I think it's somewhat ironic that the members who were sitting in the House at that time and who are still sitting here today were part of that government. And today they're saying that there shouldn't be a prorogation. So you're saying one thing and the opposite at the same time. If at the time the reasons were right and didn't have to be justified, well, today the pandemic was the reason. And if that's not a good reason, I don't know what is.
Mr. Turnbull?
I'm sorry to cut off my colleague, Mr. Lazon. I was just going to ask if we've been going for a while now. Could I ask perhaps that we could have a quick recess or moment just for a bio break for the members of the committee that had probably been holding their bladders for long enough? If you wouldn't mind, just 5 or 10 minutes max.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if, as long as all the members don't mind suspending for 10 minutes.
As long as I have the mic when I come back.
Yeah. I guess we're not leaving on a dilatory motion like Mr. Nader has pointed out before. Won't make that mistake again. You can have the floor in 10 minutes.
Right. Okay, 10 minutes.
Okay. off. Mr. Luzon, you have the floor.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Whoop. Something happened with this mic.
Uh-oh.
Hello, you can hear me now?
We can hear you.
Bon, okay. I guess at this point, because now I see the time. What time is it? Est-ce que vous voulez que je demande si on peut ajourner le...
Maybe we could adjourn the committee and start again Thursday. I could continue Thursday.
Okay, so so hold on. I guess that's another dilatory motion moving to adjourn. Do we need to have a vote on that, or if we're
so
seeing there's no
I'm asking a vote to adjourn today and come back on Thursday.
Okay.
Because it's 1:38, and if not, I just want to continue, but I ask for the vote.
Madam Chair, I just want to confirm when we're talking about adjournment, and this is one of my greatest things, adjournment versus suspension.
It's different.
I want to ensure
it's more a suspension. Suspension, we come back on the same issue on Thursday.
Okay, and now I'm in a procedural issue. Can we have a vote to suspend, Justin? Okay. All right. So if you could help us through that.
Madam Chair, the question is on Mr. Lozon's motion to suspend the committee meeting. Madame Petitpas-Taylor.
Yes.
Dr. Duncan.
Yes.
Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Monsieur Lozon.
Oui.
Mr. Sims.
Yes.
Ms. Vecchio.
No.
Mr. Lakiski.
No.
Mr. Nader.
No.
Mr. Kent.
No.
Madame Normandin.
No.
Mr. Blakey.
No.
Madam Chair, 5 yeas and 6 nays. Motion is defeated.
Okay. Mr. Luzon, you have the...
No.
Oh, no, right. We have the next person on the floor. Why did I forget after I said I wouldn't forget that? All right. We have Mr. Turnbull next.
Wonderful. Thank you, colleagues, and thanks to my honorable colleague, Mr. Lozon, for his thoughtful remarks. And I certainly appreciate everything that he has to offer to this committee. And you were missed greatly while you were away. I know I was away before you with being under the weather as well. So I really felt your opening remarks when you said we're not all invincible and we need to take care of our health. So I appreciate that. I'll just, I want to go back to an argument that I've been making. I've been making this argument in every meeting that we've had on this amendment. And I've extended it and shifted the argument to support the amendment that I put forward to Ms. Vecchio's original motion. And my argument, really, I think, focuses on a couple of major points that I continue to reiterate and then provide rationale and evidence for. And I know that the members of this committee are often interjecting with comments about relevance. And so I offer the sort of structure of my argument, even though it's somewhat repetitious because some members have heard it before, but I offer that to ensure that you understand how the things that I'm saying relate to and are relevant to the argument that I continue to make. And I keep finding more, and the more I research and learn, and I appreciate the fact that this extended debate has actually given me the opportunity to learn more and more about the deep economic, social, health, and equity related impacts or inequities that the pandemic has caused. Obviously, there's no intent there. A pandemic, a virus is not, although I'm told by virologists that viruses are very smart, and they're not thinking rational beings like we are. And although their intelligence at a molecular cellular level is quite something, I think we really have to take the time to understand this virus and the impacts that it's had on every part of our society. And the reason that the amendment that I put forward, I think, is a real chance to compromise. We haven't got any indication from members opposite on this committee whether they would vote in favor of my amendment at all. I think generally we've seen that if there was a willingness to be adaptable, flexible, I'm sure that the members on this committee would have vocalized their support for that amendment by now.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
That.
Just to Mr. Turnbull's point, I think I'm ready to vocalize my opinion on this, and perhaps the clerk could call the roll call vote, and we could all vocalize our opinions on this amendment and get on to the main motion.
Yeah, the reminder is always helpful, but I think I've already asked this question several times now, so I know what the answer is going to be, unfortunately or fortunately. So Mr. Turnbull, go ahead.
Thank you. I mean, if I were to evoke the Sims protocol, I would love to hear from Mr. Nader whether he's supportive of the amendment that I put forward.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to use the Sims protocol, especially since our friend Mr. Sims is actually on the committee today, and I would say that I'm not supportive of the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to revive the Sims protocol, which I think, unfortunately, during this filibuster by the Liberals has been unused, and I think it's great that we're getting back to using this protocol. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Maybe we'll see its use more in the coming. I don't know. I not even going to say days because I don't want to say that anymore. I hope for the best. Mr. Turnbull.
Well, given that, then Mr. Nader obviously isn't convinced by my lengthy and rational evidence-based argument that I've been putting forward meeting after meeting. And I do understand that sometimes politics seems to override rational, thoughtful debates. So I will continue to make my argument in hopes that he will come around or see the light and perhaps support my amendment, which is exactly why I continue to speak on this matter and have, I think, thoughtful remarks that I've prepared that are supporting that amendment. The main tenet of my argument, or the main conclusion of my argument that I've been making meeting after meeting, is that if a pandemic is not a reason for proroguing, or not a good enough reason for proroguing Parliament, then nothing is. And I've said this over and over again, and I really feel like this is something that is undeniably rational in my mind, that, we're in the middle of a public health crisis. We haven't seen this kind of public health crisis in 100 years. And, previous prime ministers have used their prerogative to, prorogue Parliament when they've seen it necessary to do so. And sometimes there's a bit of controversy around that, whether they've done it for solely political reasons. And I get that. But I also think that the reasons that are most cited are often the result of a need to reflect, reset the agenda, reevaluate, understand the impacts. The 2008, 2009 two prorogations that Stephen Harper at the time, utilized his prerogative to prorogue Parliament. At that time, the main reason for that was cited over and over again in the media was the recession at the time. And I understand that recession was of deep concern. We could debate that prorogation, and I know there's some members that feel strongly about that one sort of being an abuse of powers of prorogation. But in reality, the Prime Minister at the time had hit the prerogative and used it and cited reasons that I think, were largely accepted. and were rational given the recession at the time. So what I've been saying for quite a number of meetings now, and I see Mr. Nader's not convinced, but hopefully I'll get at least one other colleague to come around to the side of reason and rationality, and eventually support the amendment. But listen, the main argument is that the pandemic that we're living through and trying to manage and support a country through is at least 10 times greater in terms of the depth of financial impact than that 2008-2009 recession. So, I mean, if that's the case, then it's 10 times better a reason, at least, to prorogue Parliament in between the first and second wave of the pandemic. And I think, there's lots of evidence to show how, again, that makes sense. So, one thing I wanted to focus on today within that overarching argument is the reason, again, which I think Ms. Petitpas-Taylor, I think, said quite well, and my colleague, Mr. Lazone, also said quite well, which is why, we feel strongly that having some additional testimony from the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance in this case would be helpful on this study. And that's because of that depth of economic impact that we've all witnessed and we've heard from constituents across our ridings. I certainly have been staying in touch with my Chamber of Commerce and the many small businesses at the Whitby Chamber that are members, and the ones that are not members, because there's many small businesses that unfortunately aren't members of the Chamber of Commerce. But I have a very strong small business community in my riding, and the community there's at least 900 small businesses that are members, and many of them have shared with me over and over and over again in phone calls, in roundtables and consultation sessions, in meetings that we've had with those stakeholders, in the Chamber of Commerce meeting with me to talk about their sort of advocacy on behalf of the small businesses that fall into different sectors and industries of the local economy here. And so I've heard, what's working, what's not working, what their concerns are. And, I think when we look at the, chief statistician for Canada and the work that was done around that I've cited before as a substantive body of evidence that was collected and it's been updated since then. I actually found the updated version, which is COVID-19 in Canada, a 1-year update on social and economic impacts recently, and I've been going through that. I don't know whether I'll get to that today, but certainly if this debate is extended, I'm happy to cover a lot of what's in that report as well, because it does support, again, the trends that we've seen from the first wave of the pandemic have, and we saw between the first and second wave, there were some industries and businesses that were hard hit, but that were able to start to come back and not fully recover, but some of them were, some industries actually did better in the crisis. I know that sounds strange. There are some that did better and were more profitable. There are others that suffered dramatically, but that between waves when restrictions were starting to be lifted by provinces and territories, that they were able to come back quickly. But there are so there's sort of three categories. There's another segment of businesses that were in industries that were hard hit or hardest hit and that couldn't come back as quickly. And so there's kind of this resiliency that's built into some industries. And I think it's important for our government, and was important at the time of prorogation, for our government to assess the level of that impact, to see what industries were kind of bouncing back on their own, and to understand the structural barriers that some industries were encountering that would limit their ability to recover just in virtue of the nature of their business models. And I think, that's really important information to process. It was really important at the time, I think, for doing a deep reflection and listening and talking to those stakeholders. We know that industry, in every industry, we have very strong associations that do incredible work to survey their members. So I have reports here from the airline industry, from the food service industry, from the tourism industry. I have some others here from the hotel industry, and they're all really substantive reports on that those industries have prepared with their associations, helping to survey, consult, and collect data and really understand what those industries are going through. And it's interesting if we think of industry specific measures and supports, I think that's part of some of the complexity to dealing with a global pandemic and how that pandemic has affected industries differently and how they're challenged by economic recovery in very different ways. And we know this with some of the steep losses in the highest impacted sectors that net employment losses, for example. So I have some numbers here. I like numbers. I'm not a mathematician by any means, but I definitely like backing up the things that I claim and say with data. And I realize that data can be interpreted in different ways. But when you're relying on, the chief statistician of Canada, I think we're talking about a pretty reputable source of information here. Like we can all question data and evidence we find on the internet from time to time, and I think have to sort of evaluate where information comes from and certainly do some due diligence. But I think there are trusted sources of information, and I try to use those as best I can when formulating arguments that I use as a member of parliament. So some of these hardest hit industries, we know accommodation and food services, retail, construction, transportation and warehousing, manufacturing, information, culture and recreation. These industries have been hard hit, but again, not all equally. Accommodation and food services, these were statistics again collected between when the pandemic first hit. So let's say about February 2020 or March 2020 to August 2020. So really only covers the first wave of the pandemic. There were 260,000 net job losses in the accommodation and food services industry. That's like a pretty significant net loss of employment. There in retail, there was 120,000 net job losses. Construction, there was approximately 120,000 net job losses. Transportation and warehousing was about 100,000 or a bit more than 100,000 net job losses. Manufacturing, 80,000 net job losses. And information, culture, and recreation was approximately 100,000 net job losses. So you add that up and you've got, just off the top of my head, you have about 800,000 jobs, net job losses right there so, I mean, there was probably more than that, but I think the statistics show that those were the industries that were most impacted in terms of net job losses. Construction and manufacturing seemed to rebound to more than 90% of its pre-COVID levels as businesses reopened. In some places, I have construction across the street from my house here that there's a lot of development happening in my riding, and some of that construction has stayed pretty constant throughout this pandemic. I've been awfully surprised that some of those job sites have continued and that workers are continuing to work. I suppose they've been social distancing and been able to continue. But I think what's interesting to note here Mr. Kent, is I like to refer your names once in a while just to make sure that that you're still paying attention to me. The 90% of pre-COVID levels in construction and manufacturing, that's between the first and second waves. So you could see that that industry rebounded a lot more quickly than accommodation and food services. By contrast, with employment in their industry, which remained 20% below pre-pandemic levels. So it was less, less likely to rebound as quickly. And I think there's reasons for that. That again, our government took the time to assess and reflect. And when you look at the throne speech again, so today my focus is on hardest hit sectors or industries and how the throne speech, I think, really reflected the consultation work and the evidence that was available and the information that industry associations were providing to the government at that time. So again, very rational, very logical in terms of, one thing following from another. Like there's a sort of a chain of causality there that really, I think, backs up the interpretation that flies in the face of, I think, what, opposition parties are trying to build a narrative that somehow prorogation was some abuse of power. And I've heard members say that this was precedent setting, and like I don't agree with that this was some abuse of power. I think it was done for legitimate reasons that show up and that are evidenced by a whole bunch of factors that I've continued to bring to this committee and represent as I think the more plausible, more rational narrative that I think if Canadians, or as they say in law, people that are rational judges. This is sort of the heart of a jury, the idea of a jury, that people have this ability to reason, and that if impartial, rational people were to judge the evidence that we've provided, that they would, the vast majority of them would side with the most rational explanation. And I think this is why I keep why I can't stop, speaking to this amendment that I put forward, because I feel very strongly that this rational argument that we've been making is supported by data and evidence and research and consultation work. And, it seems really contradictory to rational argument to assume some other motive that is not backed up by evidence, especially when we know that much committee business in other areas that certainly some of the opposition parties have been consumed by or focused on for some time has in fact continued. So it's really shocking to me to see that we can't get past this and move forward with other committee business, which I've been trying to provide some alternatives in my remarks, and some, I think, worthy studies and debates and discussions that we could be having that would truly be beneficial to Canadians right now, beneficial to the future election process whenever that time comes. And I really feel like PROC, because of its mandate, could be studying some of these other issues, hate groups registering in our election process, and misinformation online, intentional, knowing people presenting that knowingly within an elections process to affect the results. These are extremely important and concerning issues that I think we should be seized with rather than this. But I'll get back to my argument. So I want to talk about the structural challenges in heavily impacted sectors. And again, I'm presenting information that was pulled together by the chief statistician and is in the report that I've referred to about 5 or 6 times now. So transportation and warehousing sector employs 1 million people across Canada. And tourism, 22.1 million tourists come to Canada from abroad in any given year. Obviously, that hasn't happened this year. And travelers spent over $22 billion in Canada. This is like, just think about the impact on our economy not to have those revenues or income for the many tourism or tourist related sectors and businesses that are out there. So everything from hotel stays to excursions to visiting the like, we have all kinds of destinations in Ontario that, from campgrounds to beaches. My favorite is Wasaga Beach. I've been going there since I was a kid. It's the biggest freshwater beach in North America. And, you just think about how these small communities, often rural communities, their economy has been drastically impacted by the pandemic, and through no fault of really any governments. I think the government is doing its best to implement public health restrictions that reduce the spread of COVID-19. In some cases, we've seen provinces more successful than others, for sure. And I have some critical remarks on that from time to time, but I'll leave those for a moment. But just to think about the economic impact, the average per trip spend in 2018 was $1,640 spent per trip. I did some work many years ago with the tourism, mostly on food related or agri-food tourism, and there was a lot of evidence to show that how even travel inside a province really supported local economies, and specifically around food, sustainable food and local food economies in Ontario, but across Canada, because people spend more on these small trips on food and accommodation, and that money really stays in local communities. It really helps support small family businesses, restaurateurs. My favorite is in Stratford County, the Savor Stratford festivals that I used to go to, that really demonstrate the power of food and agriculture, and restaurateurs, and just the festivals like that. We have them all over Canada, and these are a big part of our culture. So you can see how travel, food, accommodation, and cultural recreation all sort of actually fit in some cases together, or at least intersect in a way to support local economies, and they've been drastically hindered in terms of their growth or their prosperity during the pandemic. The airline industry, I think I've said this piece a little bit before. I'm not sure if I've said the whole statistic, but the decline in the industry, in the airline industry, from 9/11 was 26%. From the SARS outbreak was 26% decline, and from the global pandemic was 97%. So again, you can just understand the level of exponential impact that COVID-19 has had on our economy, and the airline industry is no exception. But again, there's many others. I know with public transit, ridership is down significantly, and rightfully so. We understand why. People are being asked to stay home and to prevent the spread of COVID-19. That makes sense, but we understand that municipalities were having trouble running the public transit routes, and some of them had cut back on those routes, which I think is a responsible thing to do in a pandemic, but they were experiencing shortfalls. Again, our government through the Safe Restart agreements, offered them support. I know my regional government locally here really benefited from those funds. And again, this is all part of, I believe, a pretty thorough reflection and reassessment of our government's priorities during prorogation. The commercial real estate industry in Q2 of 2020 fell by 3.1%. That may not seem like a lot, but it has a significant economic impact. And again, this was just after the first wave, or just during the first wave of COVID-19. Just think about how commercial rents would have been affected again and again. Obviously, the original version of CECRA, as we called it, I hate using acronyms, but we tend to use them a lot. But that was the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program in its initial iteration, which I can definitely admit to committee members wasn't my preferred design for that program. I think our government did its very best to design a program that would help both landlords and small businesses that were renting space. We know that some of the hardest hit industries from COVID-19 are the ones that have the highest overhead costs. It's very hard to shift a business. Like I've had some businesses even go out of business in my local community, and mainly it's because of the costs that they've had for overhead that are often tied to property or a facility that they rely on. So for example, we have those places that are like indoor kids playgrounds. They kind of work a bit like a child minding place for parents, but you can have your kids go and play with other kids. Obviously, they were shut down due to public health guidelines fairly early on, but many of them had significant costs associated with their overhead. And so, having a program for commercial rent assistance was extremely important to those businesses. And I think what I witnessed between the first and second wave and exactly at the time of prorogation, and I actually had conversations with the Minister of Finance at the time about redesigning that program and some of the challenges that I had heard about from landlords who were not participating in the original version of that program. And so that reevaluation was reflected in the throne speech, and there was subsequently a re-engineered or redesigned commercial rent assistance program that was significantly improved. And if we hadn't have taken the time to reflect and check in with stakeholders, I believe that wouldn't have happened. That businesses in my community that have now been able to access direct support instead of through their landlord, that program would not have been redesigned in such a way that it, I think, really meets the needs of many commercial tenants, and which, by the way, are mostly small businesses, as far as I can tell, at least in my community. And I was getting lots and lots of feedback in and around the time that was that prorogation happened. So it actually worked out well for relaying that feedback. And so that program was redesigned. The program now goes direct to tenants. It's indexed to the proportion of revenue loss for small businesses and gives them up to 65% rent support. And then it also adds a top up, which wasn't there before, up to 25% if the business is shut down due to a mandatory public health order. These were such welcome changes in my community, and the local businesses here, like the ones that I was talking about that are hardest hit, the small family-owned hair salons, I could use a hair salon, but I can't get a haircut these days. But you know, the very small family-run restaurant. There's all kinds of others, but you know, independently owned optometrist, et cetera, et cetera. I have many, many, many examples of small businesses in my community. We even have downtown Whitby have the Fart Cafe. It's called. That's not their name, but it's the acronym that they use, and it's an art cafe. But it's often referred to in that way as a local joke. So you know, I think you know, the point is that the supports that were extended to the small businesses and the supports that were redesigned were really tailored based on the you know, the time that we took to reflect and gather evidence and data. So, you know, and just think about that, you know, many of the tenants, I think, that are in those commercial buildings may in fact, you know, the ones that don't need space, don't absolutely need space, may actually, you know, rely less on space, renting space in the future, or may reassess how they operate. And we've seen a lot of that as well. So I've heard from local cleaners, for example, some of them operate with the model where they actually don't do all the cleaning on site, but they have a separate facility to do, you know, cleaning. And so they're often small family owned businesses. And some of them have given up their storefront space, which are very small, like a little kiosk where you walk in and you drop off shirts to be cleaned, or whatever it is, alterations and cleaning. And those businesses have opted for, well, we don't really need our, you know, we'll operate online now. So they've shifted to an online model. I have a local catering business here that specializes in some really unique kinds of baking, and for people that have special diets. And they're really famous in my community, and they've done a really great job. They shifted a lot of their work from having more of a kind of a almost a delivery truck where they just have a commercial kitchen facility and then deliver, but they do everything online now. So other than the actual baking and delivery, which does require some physical space, but they've looked at ways to shave off their operational models so that they rely less on space that they need to rent, so that they can reduce their overhead costs and remain viable during the pandemic. And those are strategies that many small businesses have been encouraged to, you know, and by necessity, that they've had to alter their operations and business models and reevaluate how do they reduce their costs and remain viable during a global pandemic and get through this. I think there's likely to be downward pressure on new office building lease rates and longer term impacts on commercial real estate. I think they're going to be substantial. I think the evidence shows that. And I think reflecting and taking the time to reflect is important for our government. And I would welcome opposition parties to participate in the fruitful dialogues that I think can happen to ensure that we tailor supports for the hardest hit industries. And I want to say a few words about the retail sector and industry. We saw that at the time at the time of prorogation, the retail sector had actually rebounded very quickly from storefront closures in the first wave. Many elevated their efforts based on e-commerce. So this is having an online website where they could actually sell their products online. Our government actually supported initiatives for the digital Main Street, which I was very proud of because it allowed a lot of retail stores in my community, small ones, that were like boutique shops that were doing all kinds of, I think that are really a lot of the heart of our local economies especially our downtown areas. Mine in Whitby is quite small, but there's two actual sort of centers in Whitby. There's Brooklyn and there's downtown Whitby, and it's filled with these small, local, beautiful boutiques that are family-run businesses. Some cases they've been in the family for generations, and in other cases they've changed hands, and sometimes you know some businesses have gone under and new ones have emerged. But really making a vibrant kind of downtown, I think that's really important that we don't lose that. And I know that that many in my community are very at the two BIAs that we have are very vocal advocates for ensuring that those businesses don't go under. But what's interesting is that many of them needed support, or I shouldn't say needed, because I think they're all entrepreneurs, are very resilient and I think really innovative. And when push comes to shove, they find a way to get through the hard times. But I do think that our government support through that Digital Main Street initiative was really helpful in helping a lot of small businesses catalog their inventory and move to online sales and marketing. And that gives them market access at a time, when really their physical locations were closed down. So some of them were able to, I remember back to the sort of the holidays, Christmas holidays, but the holidays over December, how this is such a big important time for many of those types of businesses to generate their sales and that carry them throughout the year, and that those businesses despite the fact that COVID-19 continued in our community, they did better as a result of having that digital platform and the e-commerce sites and the support that our government had offered through the local chambers of commerce, which I think are pretty important, supportive structures to help. I really believe in the local chamber of commerce here in Whitby. They're fantastic. They're run by great people. A lot of business owners are involved, and they really are a strong voice. And don't give up. They really persist through the challenging times and the bumps in the road, and they continue to constantly be in communication with me in my office and to continue to inform us about how the different industries within our local community have been affected by COVID-19. I see you unmuting, Madam Chair. I have a lot more to say, but I suspect you have something that you want to.
I just wanted to. I could see you ending one thought process, so I thought maybe it was a good time, and considering the timing, to just survey the committee, because the clerk is also asking me, virtually tapping me on the shoulder, to see if the committee is going to decide to suspend at some time. There is around the time a decision has to be made. I think the Agriculture Committee is the committee that would be using this space after us. So wanted to just get an idea. And I also would have to suspend anyways, regardless of what the decision is at this point, around a little bit before 3 for the vote that's going to happen. So I was just going to remind you that that's coming up soon as well. And there's no bells for that. Any comments from anybody on that?
I raised my hand on this. I think we all recognize the importance of all the committee's work. And by no means do I think that we want to end any of it. Perhaps we could have a vote before the end of the time. I believe 2:30 is the cleaning time. And we are very, very aware of this and don't want anything else to continue to be impacted like last week's Human Committee, et cetera. So, if we could go to a vote, that'd be great. Was that something we are able to do?
I can put the question again. There is a speakers list. And would you guys be willing to go to a vote? Either way, vote or no vote, I still need a decision. Are you saying, Ms. Vecchio, that only if a vote is to
well, no,
occur
I'm just trying to see where
if,
I'm just trying to see where we're at, because
okay.
honestly, it's just, you know, we recognize this, but what we're going to be doing is this what we're going to be doing now until, as Mr. Lozon had indicated months ago, as to the election. Mm-hmm. So those are my concerns. I think we're all good to close for the day, to be honest, to suspend for the day, because we understand the impact. But I do believe that at some time there must be a decision.
Is everybody, and like Ms. Vecchio was saying, is everyone willing to vote before the close of this meeting at before 2:30 today?
I mean, vote to suspend, right?
No, not vote to suspend. I think we have got consensus to suspend, but Ms. Vecchio just wants to put the question out there whether you're willing to vote for the amendment.
No.
Okay.
All
right. So, Mr. Turnbull, are you okay with us suspending at this point in your remarks?
Sure, as long as I have the floor when we come back at the next meeting.
Okay, so we will suspend until next Thursday. We will suspend until next Thursday's meeting. Suspended.